All right. Looks like we have everyone. Then let's get started. First of all, thanks everyone for taking the time to join this workshop. I know market is really volatile. Appreciate everyone's time to join here. Before I start, I just want to mention it again. Today's workshop will be mainly focused on how to guide you through how to run Perp-Maker on your computer and as well as run it on AWS. So if you already check the tutorial or you already install all those stuff and you already know how Perp works, then it is highly recommend that you just go through a step on the tutorial or just check a report. You'll be much faster than listening me to go through all of them. So before I start, is there any questions or? Oh, so when I do in the workshop, just feel free to type your question in the chat. I will answer them when I see it. All right, I guess there's no question. Perfect. Then let's get started. In today's workshop, it should take less than an hour. We will go through the following things. So the first one is I will just go through how Perp works and also live demo it. So you guys have a deeper knowledge of how it works. And the second one is the risk and reward to be a maker. And then the third and the fourth things we will cover are the meat of today's workshop. It will be running. I will guide you through the step to run Perp-Maker on your machine as well as on AWS. And then the fifth part, I will explain some feature direction that you could explore because this is an open source software, so you could modify however you like. Then let's get started. So in case somehow you don't know, Perp-V2 is a perpetual trading protocol on Optimism. The way how it works is, let me find the chart. So the way how it works is users, they could deposit USDC on Perp-V2. And then on the system, there is a smart contract called clearinghouse. Basically, clearinghouse is like the manager or the manager that record everything happens on the protocol. So when people deposit USDC, the clearinghouse will record these users' deposit, and as well as it will credit 10x amount of BUSD on this user's balance. And user don't need to spend all of them at once. So those 10x amounts is the leverage that our system gives to the users. In other words, on Perp-V2, the maximum amount of leverage you could use to trade or market make is 10x. So once user deposits the USDC, the USDC will be stored inside another smart contract called the vault. And that's the place where USDC is stored. And as I mentioned, the BUSD is credited to the user. So whenever user want to trade, in this case, this is a trader. So when a user want to trade, the clearinghouse will mint the BUSD on behalf of the user and throw it to send some message or phone. So we have a question about, did you send some messages or phone? Oh, okay. Yep. For sure. Oops. All right. Then let me continue. Okay. Where was I? Oh, right. So, so a quick TLDI is user deposit USDC, and the system will give users 10x amount of the USDC's credits to the user, and then they could market make or trade with on the system. So let me just do a live demo to show you how it works. So when you go to test.per.exchange, this is our testnet. The money here is fake. So people could just deposit their USDC. Oops, 1 second. And later we will run our bots first on testnet, and you could request for the test token. Where is it? The test token on Artifacet. So this link, let me pass in the chat. So this link is where you could get a test token that we will use later. Oh God, my computer is so slow today. Great. Let's get back to our testnet. So as I mentioned, user could deposit on our protocol. Today it is so slow. Well, let's add. Let's try it again later. So this is trader's case. So when you trader want to trade, the clearinghouse will mint the VUSD from its balance sheet, because its users deposit, they will have a 10x amount of USD belongs to this trader. So when they place a trade, the clearinghouse will mint for this trader. And for maker, which is the role we are playing during this workshop, the clearinghouse basically do the same. So when you deposit USDC, the clearinghouse will give you the credits, 10th amount of the deposited USDC as your credit on its balance sheet, and then you could provide liquidity on top of Perpetual Protocol, and in return you could get 80% of the transaction fees. So that is the basic of how Perp v2 works, and the entire system is actually built on top of Uniswap v3. So yeah, that's pretty much how Perp v2 works. Before I continue, is there any questions till this point?
I actually had one question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so all these leveraged assets, they're existent only on the exchange, right? We cannot transfer them to another wallet, say, on any other external wallet, which apart from the exchange.
Oh no, you cannot. So once you deposit USDC, then the virtual token here minted by clearinghouse cannot transfer to the outside of the exchange.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, then let's continue. Then in the following session, I will explain the risk and reward with the form for alt. I will pass it later. All right. For the risk and reward to be a maker, so being a maker on Perp v2, you are actually work as the counterparty of each trade. So let me provide a liquidity first. It will make more sense once you see the example. God, this is so slow today. Well, while we are waiting, then let me go back to the article. So when providing liquidity on Perpetual, i.e. being a maker, you could decide the price range that you are willing to provide liquidity to. So for instance, in this screenshot, this is a BTC market, BTC perpetual market. And when I took the screenshot, the price of BTC is around 30,000 USDC. And you could determine which price range you provide liquidity to. And in this case, I want to provide liquidity from around 10,000 to 60,000. And then if you are using the user interface, you could actually see the virtual assets that is minted by the clearinghouse. So when I mentioned before, the clearinghouse will mint the virtual assets that you want to trade or you want to provide liquidity with on demand. And the amount is actually backed by your credits on its balance sheet. And oops. And whenever there's a trade happened during the price range you set, you clear 80% of the fees in that price range. Yep. So ideally, because we could set the price range, right? And whenever there's a price movement, a trade happen in the price range you set, you could collect 80% of the transaction fee. So in the ideal situation, the left-hand side it will be better because as you can see, every trade happens in the price range you set. So whenever there's a trade happened, you could collect fee. And the worst situation is on the right hand side, where as you can see, the price just suddenly just go out of your range. Then since you cannot collect fee out of the price range, your impermanent loss will just continue to increase, and then the fees you collected will not increase. In other words, let me show. So in other words, being a maker, you could the major income is the transaction fee. That when you collect it, when you could collect it when a trade is happening in the price range you set. And additionally, there's another campaign we are running called liquidity mining. So when you provide liquidity on Perp-V2, you could earn our token called Perp in addition to the transaction fee you collect. And since on Perp-V2, you are the counterparty to each trade, which means that when a user opens a long position, and you are essentially open a short position. So that's how our system works. And the impermanent loss in this context is if a trader is making money, then you are actually losing money. But if the price go back to the initial price you set, then there will be no impermanent loss. I hope this makes a little sense now, but to make sure we are on the same page, let me just deposit right now to demonstrate. All right. So as I mentioned, you could determine the price range you set. So for instance, right now ETH is trading at 1141. You could determine the price range you set. So in this case, I want to provide from 912 to around 1400. then you could type user on our user interface, you could just type amount, and our UI will just calculate the amount for you. And to demonstrate what I meant by you are the counterparty of each trade, let me just only provide the up and the upside. So as you can see, if right now the current price is 1100, right? And if you only provide the liquidity on the upside, then as you can see, you are actually only provide liquidity with virtual ETH. The reason why this happens is if a user opens a long position, right, and the price increase above to the upper bound of your price range, then some of your ETH will be sold to the user because user is open long position, right? So they will get some of your ETH. And in other words, some of your ETH will be sold, so you open a short position. That's what I meant by when you provide liquidity, you are a counterparty to the traders. And if the price goes above to the your lower price range, then later it goes down, then you only collect transaction fee because the price range is the price go back below your upper price bound, price bound, then you only collect transaction fee. Make sense? Okay, I guess. Do we have any questions so far? All right, I guess there is no question yet. Yeah, let me just show you a real example. So we have a partner called CEDO, CEDO Finance. You could see the liquidity, see how well your maker position perform. So in this case, you could see the price range you set as well as the impermanent loss you have. So yep. So for instance, I provide liquidity for ETH from 1100 to 1152. Since it is still in the range because the current price is this amount, right? And is still in my price range, so I can continue to collect fees. And on CEDO, they will just show you your net return. So the way how you calculate is they will just deduct the fees you collected minus the impermanent loss. So they will just show you the net return. Yep, this is another handy site you could use to check your performance while being a maker on our platform. All right. If we don't have any other question for risk and reward to be a maker, then let's just continue to our main objective today. We will start trying to run Perp-Maker on your computer. All right, there are some stuff like you need to do before we could start to run it on your computer. The first thing is that you need to install MetaMask on your computer. So I believe everyone here already have installed their MetaMask. So I'll just continue to the next step. So the second one is you need to request some USDC and test ETH that you're going to use later. And I have already passed the link in the chat, so you could go to Artifacet. Oops. Yep, just go to coven.artifacet.com and then paste your Ethereum address, Ethereum address over there and request on Coven. then you could get the test USDC and test ETH that you could run it later. All right, I assume everyone is following. If you encounter any questions or problems, just leave it in the chat or just feel free to let me know. And then as the next step, you need to install Node.js on your computer because we need to install Node.js in order to run our program. And yep, let me just pass the link in the chat. Yep, you need to download, depend on which operation system you use, you're going to download the installer on your computer, and then just continue to click a save button. Yeah, this is how you run Node.js. And once it is installed, then a way to check is you could open your terminal. Also on Mac, you could open your terminal. On Windows, it's called Command Prompt. So once you have installed Node.js, you could just type node.version. Then it will just show the version that your node is running. So, and one thing that's worth reminding you is that there's an npm package that you are about to install, and the version must within this range. So once you install Node.js, remember to run npm npm-v, then to see if the version of your npm is within the supported range. Yep. All right, I assume everyone is progressing, then I will just continue. All right, and then the next step is, for Windows user, sometimes you will say no is not recognized as an internal or external command. You could just go to environment. Yep, here it is. Edit the system environment variables. You could open it, and then there's the environment variables, and within the system variables table, there's a thing called path. Path, what is path? Here, over here, edit, and then you need to add the place where you install Node.js. In my case, I install in this directory, but it depends on where you install your Node.js. And you need to click new and then pass the folder where you install your Node.js. Then once you do this, and as a Windows user, you should be able to run the command we just mentioned before. Okie dokie, then let's continue. The next step is we need to install Git on your computer. Yep, let me also pass it in the chat so people could download it. All right. Well, as before, there are different kind of install method based on your OS. So just find, if you are using Mac OS, use the install guide here, and if you are using Windows, you just download the thing over here. And once it is installed, another way to test if it's installed successfully is just run the git -version. Oops. Oh, there's a space. Well, that also works. So, oh, it's double hyphen. Sorry, git -version. Here we go. Is everyone following? All right, I assume everyone is following. Then that's about to clone this project to your machine. Then those commands are the ones we are about to run. Let me also pass it in the chat. Because I already cloned the project on my computer, so I'm not going to do the first command, but please do on your computer. And then once it is cloned on your computer, it is downloaded on your computer, you need to move to the folder and then install the things by the npm I command. Then once it is installed, it's still a couple, looks like it's still a couple second wait. But once it is all installed, you need to run npm run build on your command prompt or terminal on Mac OS. All right, this is I have installed everything successfully. Then the next thing is, as I mentioned, you need to run npm run build in order to build your project. Again, if you are a Windows user and then you see something like Git is not recognized as an internal external command, you need to modify the environment variable as I demonstrated earlier. Yes, it will be available. Again, if you have some background in programming, it's actually faster for you to just see the blog post. This one is more for beginners or the ones who are not familiar with Perp-V2. So we could just troubleshoot whichever obstacle you have. All right. Oh, oops, there are some two errors. Okay. You shouldn't supposed to see those errors because I add those two things after I've installed it, but I will explain it later. If everything goes well, you should be able to see similar comment like this, similar message like this. All right, that's pretty much it from setting up to install it on your computer. So right now the software is installed on your computer. Then we need to start to modify it. Then let's go to I use Visual Studio Code as a code editor to modify the software, but you could use text editor, whichever you like, a code editor or text editor, whichever you like. So right now we're going to modify the bots so it could run our strategy. So there are around three things that we got to modify. The first one is the .env file. So when you download it, there should be a .env example file, which there are three variables that need you to put value inside. The first one is Web3 endpoint. You could get a free Web3 endpoint on Infura. So if you go to infura.io or Alchemy, just create a new project and then select Ethereum and then just Perp-Maker project and just type Perp-Maker. And then you could, so when we test our Perp-Maker, we are testing on optimism and Coven. So that's why when we get the Web3 endpoint, you need to choose the endpoint Artemision Coven, and then to copy the endpoint and pass it layer, lies the path for layer 2 Web3 endpoint. And I'm going to delete this one because I don't want to get hit by a giant bill tomorrow. So sorry about it. And then the second thing is about private key. So if I think everyone here is already using MetaMask, but as a reminder, since we're developing a software, so it's recommended that you use another wallet instead of the main wallet you have been using. So you just create a new account on MetaMask. Oops. I assume you have already created an account on MetaMask. Well, when it's about time to submit your information for alt, I will say it. So in the meantime, if you have any question related to workshop, feel free to bring it up. All right, you could actually get your private key by clicking the setting button on your MetaMask and click account details. And there's an option called export private key. And you could get your private key over there and just copy it and paste it inside your env.example file. And those two variables are we need when we run it on your computer. Then once you have passed the variables on your example file, you need to rename it to .env. I believe the new version on the new version, we don't have a example file name, but we just need to let it show as .env file. All right, that's the first thing we need to do to start our bot. We need to modify the .env file, and then we need to modify the strategy. So the way how we config, what determine the box action is in the config.json file. You could find it in the source folder. Within the source folder, there's configs, and configs.json is how we control the bot's action. So there are a few variables or adjustment you could use. So for instance, the first one is price check interval. It's just quite self-explanatory. It is how the frequency for this bot to check the price. And the second one is max gas price grade. So this is the value when the maximum amount of the gas price that the bots can use to execute the strategy. But usually when on Artemision, the gas price is fixed. So no matter how high you set, you will actually you will just be the same. And within the market make, it is the markets that you want your bot to market make on top of it. And if it is enabled, you will just start running on top of the market. And the liquidity amount is the amount of VUSDC that these bots will provide liquidity with. So as I mentioned in the beginning of this workshop, so when you deposit USDC on Perp-V2, right, you will get 10x amount of virtual USDC. 10x amount of virtual USDC on the balance sheet of the clearinghouse. So the value over here is the virtual USD that you want this bot to provide liquidity with. And for instance, if you deposit 1,000 USDC to the clearinghouse or on Perp-V2, the virtual USD you have is 10,000. And usually, when you're trying it out, I would just suggest you use 1x average, which means that if you deposit 1,000 USDC, you just put 1,000 USDC over here. And the liquidity range of sets over here is the range that you want your bot to provide liquidity with. So for instance, like over here, if you say it as 0.5, the bot will provide liquidity with the range of this range. So if let's say if BTC is trading at 30K right now, and then the bots, if you set the liquidity range of say as 0.5, the bots will provide liquidity from 20K to 45K. So that's the price, the purpose of price range reset offset. And for the last attribute that we could adjust, is that a question or? Okay, I will just continue. Then for liquidity adjust threshold, this is threshold that the bots will adjust your liquidity. So this is the price range offset is the determine the range of your liquidity, right? But for the adjust threshold, it is actually about when the bots will adjust your liquidity. So for instance, even though you set the price range in this range, right? And the bots could actually help you to adjust the range when the price is hits either one of the value. So following the previous example, if the current price of the BTC is 30,000, then that means that if the price of BTC hits this amount, then the bots will withdraw your liquidity and realize the impermanent loss, and then place a new liquidity with this price range. Does everyone have any questions? So by default, I believe we just show VBTC and VPerp inside this file. You could just delete the VPerp one and then to just enable the VBTC market and then type. Well, you could type the value I type over here because we're going to run it on testnet, so it's just totally fine however you say it. All right, then one last thing before we run. So by default, the bot actually is set to run Optimism mainnet, which is not ideal for testing purpose. So you need to go to index.ts file, which is in the source folder. So in the source folder, we have an index.ts file where you need to comment those two lines. The comment as in you need to put 2 slashes before the code, like what I just did, like put 2 slashes before line 13 and line 14. Then once you did it, there's one extra step for Windows users. For Windows user, you need to type those 2 lines inside line number 7. I just paste it in the chat. For Windows user only, you need to type those 2 lines over there, and then you need to run. Oops, let me find it. Great. So for Windows user, once you type those 2 lines inside your index.ts file, then you need to run the npm install.env and then -save in your terminal or in your command prompt in order to install the .env package we are using. No, I don't think you connect it to the trading view. Oops. Somehow median just automatically deletes one hyphen. But you could also use npm install.env to install it. All right, then we are all set. We could, if you go, well, let me do a quick recap in case some of you guys just joined recently. So when you need to run, oops, where is that? All right, let me get back to the very beginning of the programming section. So you need to install Node.js on your computer, and as well as the as Git. And then once you install them for Windows user, you need to add them to your environment variable. There's a path in the system variable. You need to add the location where you install your Node.js and Git. And then once you set up, then you need to run through those commands. So you could download the project to your computer. And then, yeah, then you need to get the token that, then you need to install MetaMask. I believe of you guys have already installed. Then you need to modify the .env file, as I mentioned. So .env file, we have Web3 endpoint. You get one from Infura or Alchemy. And as for private key, you could export your private key from your MetaMask. Just recommend, I recommend everyone just use a new one because this is for testing purpose. It's better not to reveal your private key to anyone. All right, then you need to also make some adjustment for config.json file because that will affect your strategy. And for the detailed explanation, you could either check our repo for each one of the parameter, or we also explain it on our Medium blog post. Then I believe some of you guys have already done this. You need to go to Artifacet. Artifacet over here. Then you need to type your Ethereum address over there to get some OEs and USDC. Then once you get, then you are good to go. Oh, one last thing. I have mentioned this before, but in the index.ts file, you need to comment those two lines because by default it runs on Artemism mainnet. And for Windows user, you need to type those two lines of code in the index.ts file. Otherwise, Windows cannot recognize the value you put inside .env file. Then we are good to go. For macOS user, you need to run this command. Let me pass it in the chat. And then for Windows user, you need to run npm start. Yep. So as you can see in the logs, there's create orders. That means that your order has been created successfully. So this is what it looks like if the bot is successfully run on your computer. And another way to verify it is just go to testnet.per.exchange or testnet to see the markets yourself. So yep, as you can see, oops. Yep, right here. Or you could also go to EtherScan on Artemis and Coven to see if there's a new transaction. So those are 2 ways to verify. Well, 3 ways to verify if your codes run successfully. All right. Everyone following or is there any weird bug you have encountered? Yeah, let's wait for 1 minute to make sure everyone follows. Sweet. Yeah, let me check the price real quick while we are waiting for others. Hopefully it's not something too bad. Oh, that's really bad. Okay. Well, let's get back to learning then. All right, we don't have new questions, so let's continue to the next part. We are about to run it on AWS. So before we start, there are 2 things you need to do in order to run it on AWS. So the first thing, obviously, is you need to register an account on AWS. And then once you register an account, you need to install AWS command line interface on your computer. And let me find it. Right, where is it? Yeah, let me pass the link in the chat. This is the link to install AWS command line interface, which you got to need to use to configure your AWS profile. What that means is that basically we need to find a way to connect your computer to your AWS, and this command line, this tool is basically what does that. So once you have installed the AWS command line interface, then you need to open your terminal. If you're using Mac, you probably use command prompt for Windows. You just type AWS configure on your machine to configure. Oops, let me disable it to configure the AWS profile on your machine. So once you type the AWS configure, it will ask about the information of your AWS account, and you could get those info by go to my AWS. Hopefully it will not show my credential directly. So once you register an account on AWS, right? You click the top right corner. There's a security credentials. Once you click it, there is an area called access keys. And once you expand that, like click on top of it, you should be able to see the access key and your secret. That's the value you need to type once you type your AWS configure command on your terminal or command prompt. Oh, in case somehow someone cannot find these things on your computer, you just type command prompt. If you are using Mac, just search terminal on your machine. So that's how I get this black GUI thing. And All right. I will just continue. If anyone encounter any questions, just please to bring up in the chat. All right. So when we set up to run the bots on our computer, there's one value I haven't mentioned. So this is called AWS region. So basically that means that's the region or the places that I want our bot to run. So usually, because we are based in Asia, we usually just use Singapore as a place to run a server. So in my case, I would just type AP-southeast-1 in this field, but it really depends on where you locate. You could type wherever you like. So in my case, it will be this value, but you could just choose wherever that is the closest to you. All right, then we are pretty much done to run your bot on AWS. So the remaining thing to do is we need to delete, this is for Windows user only. You need to delete the 2 line we just added. Yeah, because that was for Windows and it's gone to on AWS, which is a totally different operating system than Windows, right? And that's the first thing you need to do. Then yeah, that's pretty much it. You just once you save, then you need to run those 2 commands on your terminal or on your command prompt. Again, one line after another. You cannot just pass through those 2 lines to run it at once. Usually in this step, it will take several minutes based on previous experience, but it depends on how fancy your computer is. All right, it's built, then let's deploy to AWS. While we are waiting for it to be deployed, this is the message you should be able to see if it deploys successfully. So last time it actually took around 3 minutes, but usually the first time it would take much longer. Right, while we are still waiting for it to run, let me do a quick recap on the things we need to adjust for AWS. So in order to run your bot on AWS, you need to install AWS command line interface. And then once it is installed on your computer, you need to run AWS configure, which will ask you about the things about your account, because that's the way for AWS to connect with your computer. And then you could get those information in the security credential section on AWS. You could go there by click the top right corner and then click the access keys and security access keys. Then you could see those values and you just type one after another. And then once you type, then you need to add the AWS region in your .env file. Yeah, and as I mentioned, I just used Singapore as an example. So it would be AP-southeast-1, but you just choose whoever that closest to you. And then once it is done, then you could, this is for Windows user only, you need to delete those 2 lines. And then you are all set. You just run those 2 commands. Then usually the first time it takes a lot of time, but if it's run successfully, you should be able to see similar response like I just showed you. And another way to verify it is running is you could go to your AWS and search Lambda. Or also, if you choose a different location, remember to switch to the location that you paste as your AWS region. So for instance, I choose Singapore, right? So you need to choose Singapore. If you just let me, then you could see there's a lambda function running. Yep. Yours should also call Perp-Maker main. And on your Lambda page, there's a monitor tab where you could see the logs tab over here. And yeah, you could see the real-time logs once it is installed. And also you could also see the logs on CloudWatch. So that's another way to verify if your bot is running. So logs show on AWS should be the same as you saw previously. So we saw those things previously when we ran the bots on your computer, right? Your on AWS, it should also show the same message as it showed up here. Yeah, that's pretty much it for running on AWS. Does anyone encounter any problems that I didn't mention, or you are stuck, or any questions so far? Or I assume there is none, then I will continue then. All right, then if you have already, yep, this is a success. So let me just check the logs. You could, so there are two ways to see the logs. You could either over here or click the view logs on CloudWatch. Oh, so we have a channel called wait, let me, where is this? Oops, sorry. Where is it? Oh, we have a channel on Discord called Coding Chat. So you could ask any question over there. We are happy to answer them. Yeah, that's the best place to to reach out to us when you encounter any problem when building on Perp-V2. No problem. Well, it's still loading, but yep, it is still loading. Let's log stream. Oh, that's odd. Oh, by the way, sometimes even though it is finished, it could take up to 5 minutes for the logs to show up. So it is better for you to check if it's to see if the logs show correctly after you have installed, you have deployed successfully. After deploy successfully 5 minutes, then you could check the log string. Yeah, it hasn't shown up yet. Well, in the meantime, let me continue to give you guys some explainer how you should do to prepare for mainnet. And let me find. Oh, another handy tool our community has built is called Perp Simulator. Let me pass it in the chat. On Perp Simulator, you can simulate your strategy. So you could select different kind of markets. For instance, you could select AVAX market. Then you could select the price range. Yeah, you could select the price range, and it will automatically run the back test. So you could run the back test, and it will show the confidence and what kind of APR or profitability you should expect. So this tool is handy for those who want to run strategy. This tool is handy for you to simulate the results before you put real money inside. And if you decide to put real money inside, you need to have USDC and ETH. Thank you, sirs. So for ETH, you need to well, it depends on where you usually place your fund. So if most of fund are on centralized exchange like Binance or FTX, you could use layer swap to transfer your ETH directly from Binance or FTX to Artemisin. Because Perp-V2 is on Artemisin mainnet, this is the fastest way for you to do it. You just go to layer swap and to choose, let's say you use Bitfinex, then choose Artemisin. Yep, as you can see, you could just type 0.1, then just type it over here. Then you just type your address over here. Then you could just directly transfer ETH in your account on central exchange to Artemisin. Then you can also do the same thing for USDC. Yeah, this is the fastest way for you if you most of fund on central exchange. But if you are most of your fund are on other chains like Ethereum or Polygon or AVAX, you could use like transfer .2 or whichever bridge you like to transfer fund to Artemisin. And now there are tons of bridges. So yeah, you could use either one of them to transfer your fund to USDC or an ETH to Artemisin, so your bot could start to run. Oh, and one last thing, because the Web3 endpoints we just passed, so in the .env file, we have the Web3 endpoint, right? And the one we passed it over there is for testnet. You need to get one for Artemisin. So this is another place you need to change. And the last thing you need to change is to uncomment those two lines, because by default, the bots will run on Artemisin mainnet. So that was the reason why we comment it out, because we don't want it to run on mainnet as start. Then since we want to run it on mainnet now, then we just uncomment it by deleting the two line before it. Yep, and yeah, that's pretty much the preparation to go mainnet. And since this is actually a template to market make on Perp-V2, so there are some suggestions that you could try to build if you want to learn more about building things, or you want to improve your coding style, coding skills. Those are the direction you could explore. The first one is called provide single-sided liquidity. Because right now, when you provide liquidity, you actually provide in two ways. So that is liquidity range of set is full. So when you provide liquidity right now, right, you provide, if the current price is right now, you provide the send range above the current price and the send range below the current price. And if you go to our sites, you could actually see we have a function to let user to provide single side. We call this thing EZOP. So basically, user could provide. So as you can see, if user click, they believe the price will go up, then down, then they could provide only the upside of the current price. And vice versa, if the user believe the price will go down and up, they could provide the downside. So the current price is, for instance, is 21,000, then user could provide 21,000 to 8,000 in this case. So that's one direction you could explore. And another thing is that because right now when the adjustment threshold is reached, the bar will close all of the impermanent position. So that means that if your position is huge, then that will that will have a lot of slippage that will affect, that will eat into your transaction fee you have collected. So that's another direction you could explore. You could just, when it remove the liquidity, you let the bot to close the position gradually. And the last one is multi-collateral. So right now, when you trade on Perp-V2, you could actually deposit, well, this is testnet, but on mainnet we support ETH and Frax and USDC. But right now, the bot only supports USDC as collateral. So you could also choose to explore it to see if you could build the function to support multi-collateral. And yeah, so we will have, yep. Yeah, well, before it ends, and we are a couple minutes away from ends. So, well, if you are busy, you could leave now. But once we are about to land, we will ask for people's address for the alt or OET, however you pronounce it. Yeah, and the one last thing is that I'll just quickly go through how this thing is built. So when you want to try to modify the code, right? Perp-Maker is actually quite simple and really well written. So the only file you need to check is the maker.ts file inside the maker folder. And yeah, and it's pretty much quite self-explanatory. So yeah, I would suggest that if you want to improve, you want to start building on in the Web3 field, and you want to improve your programming skill, you could actually look at this file, and the name is quite consistent, and there are also some comments that is helpful. So I would just suggest that you could see, to clone this project and then look into the maker.ts. And if you're interested, you could also try to implement those modification suggestion. No, we don't. We don't have office in Singapore. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We have so as I mentioned, we have a site called Sado. So if you are using real money to provide liquidity on Perp-V2, you could use this site to check your performance. Yep. So for instance, yeah, this is, I only provided these things for a couple hours, and this is how much I made so far. And Cito is quite handy. It will just show you the net APY and also the fee from APY. Yep, that's pretty, I think that's pretty. And another tool I also have mentioned is the Perp simulator. It's also recommend you to use it before to using money to provide liquidity. And both of those things are attached at the end of each article. So just feel free to check it out. How can I, as a developer, contribute to the protocol? Well, there are a lot of ways, right? So we have open source a lot of stuff. You could start by checking the repo to see if there are any repos you want to contribute to, or you could join our Discord to bring out your ideas. Then we can start from there. All right. Before we wrap this up, is there any remaining questions? Okay, I guess no then. Then thanks for everyone for attending. Then please paste your address in the chat so we could to give you the alt or OIT thing to you once the workshop is over. yeah, this is pretty much it. So if you have passed your address in the chat, then you feel free to leave, and I'll just stay here for 5 more minutes to collect people's address. In the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to bring up. Oh, if you want to develop Perp v2, another resource you could check is Perp SDK. This is really helpful if you want to build a site that support Perp v2. You just go to our GitHub account, then there's a what is it? Oops. There's a repo called Perp SDK. So you could use it to build a site that connect to Perp v2.